For instance, we spent so much time together in Paris. The film was hard to finance, so it really took a lot of time. But actually now, with the distance, I realized this time was very precious because it's a time we spent together, thinking of the film, of the music, and how to film the music, how to film the club scenes. And Félix got to know Sven, and Sven helped him to learn how to DJ a little bit. And I've never been thinking of a film so much, and I've never been living in a film so much before I actually shot it. And when we finally did it, it was quite extraordinary. I mean, I think the fact that we had that we had to struggle to make it, and that it was really like some kind of a fight, didn't make the shooting painful. On the contrary, it was so joyful and liberating with the film together. I mean, it's really a film that relied on the energy. I mean, we didn't have that much money to shoot it, and we had the four of us, I think, so much energy.
Working as one unit. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. You know, it was, of the paper, it was a very difficult film, and it had been for the financing, as you said, because it took actually 2 years really for this film to be able to go into filming stage. And any other person than me, I mean, it was a dead movies 100 times before we ever shot it. And it's all by the will and power of Mia, who wanted it so hard, who had so much desire making this film happen. But when we were in it, and even though it was not easy, it was like every day was just a total happiness actually to be on stage actually.
With a bit of stress.
Especially in New York.
Oh yeah, but that was when you started shooting, it was a year ago. Why was New York so stressful?
No, because it was the very beginning. The very beginning, the first time of course, that I shot in the US. Very long days. We didn't have much time, and we had a lot of things to film, and we were filming scenes with crowds, like especially the ones in this one. It was so exciting. I mean, I just love filming this way, like, you know, when you have to hide yourself and you film a real crowd. It's so funny actually to do so, but it's not easy. I mean, it was really, and also because it was the very beginning of the shooting, and we had to stop then for like 2 months, 3 months, and continue on finding more money until we could start again with the shooting. So it was a very risky way to do it. You know, we could have stopped and never finished. So I mean, of course, once you start shooting, you think, okay, now I started, so it means the film is going to go to the end. But still, with this film, we had so many troubles. I still couldn't believe. I was still kind of afraid that we couldn't go to the end, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, the shot at the beginning with the imaginary butterfly was so beautiful. So I was wondering why you decided to keep flight distances to that one example in the film instead of peppering it throughout the film.
It's a question about that incredible shot of the animated butterfly, the bird in the sky, and why there was just one moment like that in the film.
Thank you. I like the idea not to, once you do something and you think it's cool, and you know it's cool, not to do it again. You know, like, I find it easy to do it again. And so, for some reason, I like the idea to have that in the very beginning. It was a way for me to open the film to dream life, you know, to poetry. I think the film is about music, but I think it really is also about poetry, about imagination, about interiority. And I thought, like, instead of having a real bird, like, to have an imaginary bird. It's not only about taking drugs, it's also about, like, interiority. And I thought that was beautiful, and the fact that I used only one time was more interesting than having it as a gimmick, you know. And by the way, the guy who did this plays in the film. You know, the guy who is one of his friends, the one who's very quiet and sweet and who at some point sleeps in his plate, you know, and who composes music with him. He's a drawer, actually. And he did this, and he also did some of the drawings you saw in the film. Like, most of the drawings are real drawings of the guy, of the man who committed suicide and who inspired this character. But some of them, we needed to have more for some of the scenes. And this drawer acts in the film, actually. And it's actually a film that a lot of things happen like that in the film, and people were doing different things.
Yes.
So, a nice compliment about the film, which brought this one back to the days with a couple of hits. And the team on stage ever consider making a documentary about those days, about that time?
I did want to pay tribute to the scene and to these people. Really, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make the film, and I think Sven even more in a way. But I wouldn't do a documentary just because I'm so fascinated by fiction. I love fiction, actually. It can seem strange that I say so because I make film that seem autobiographical or biographical, but actually, even if my films are inspired by people who I know or who I've known, for me they're always fiction film, and what I love is really filming actors playing parts. So that's why I would never. I mean, maybe I'll do some documentary one day, but in this case, this film, what excited me was to put the film in the present through actors now.
Yes.
You mean in general, did me? So the sequences with the very slow circular motions with the Daft Punk songs, did you conceive them or write them with the music in mind? Is that your question? Yeah.
Well, actually, this came really progressively. I mean, the sequence within the Daft Punk song at the end with this slow movement where it's out of focus until you see the girl and it gets in focus again. It's weird because really like Within wasn't in the soundtrack first because when I wrote the film area and then NYFF Memory the album wasn't released yet. And so it came kind of late, this song, but when I heard it after a couple of times it became quite obvious for me. It felt as if the song was written for the film, which it wasn't of course at all, but because of the atmosphere of the song and the lyrics, I felt so connected to the song. And when, just like 2 days before I filmed it in this club, Silencio, I realized this moment, and specifically this shot, was like, for me, like the shot of the film. What I mean is like, for me, it's the moment where everything connects in the film. Him, the character, and the music, the Daft Punk music, and there's always this very deep and strong bond between them, but also him with his own past and with the death of his friend. And I think you connect with that because when his friend dies, you know, right after you have the scene in the club where you also have a Daft Punk song. So for me, this moment is really, and he also connects with the girl who represents the new generation, the new DJ. So I realized that quite late, like just before I actually shot it, I realized this specific shot was like a resume, a summary of the whole film, like the moment where everything comes together.
I wanted to just revisit that subject of interiority that you brought up before and its connection to poetry. And it's really great and moving and bright, I think, that you end the film with poetry. So I was wondering if you could talk about that for a moment, about how that's important to the film and to the character.
Well, you know, for me, a way sometimes that when I had to explain the film, talk about it, speak about the end and why the end is not a vision anymore and what's going to be his life next, I would say to people who sometimes didn't understand why I was making him into a writer. Actually, Sven is writing, so it's connected to the reality, but I could have made him into something else. But for me, it was very important because poetry was always in the center, something essential in this film, as it is for me. In general, I feel, for me, making film is about poetry. But also because I felt one way to put the film, to talk about film for me was to say it's like the music, the journey to the music is like a long detour to what maybe he really is, a writer, or to poetry. Because when the film starts and you have this discussion with his mother saying that he's talented, like you understand that he has some talent for writing, and actually he has that, and he has the music, and there is this passion for music, and there is both. And for me, it's as if he had to make this long way deep into the music to actually be able to become a writer. Like, it needed this experience. So I never feel like, it was the wrong way, and he should have done something else and become a writer. I feel like it's connected, and it's because he's been through that, because he's been going through this life for many years, that he needed that to actually become who he is, And maybe Sven could say a little bit about the choice of Robert Greeley, because you actually gave me the book that the poem is from.
Yeah, I would say that Robert Greeley is kind of, I don't know which word to use, but like organic poetry, like it's very essential in very simple words and so few words. So yeah, to me too, also it's connected to the story of the film. And I thought it was a good choice, and I introduced you to Robert Greeley's poetry and see if you like it also.
Félix, I'm wondering if you could jump in and just talk about your own connection to the character and to the music, but then maybe also to poetry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit tired. Okay. My connection to the character, to music. Actually, to music, I'm a big electronic music fan, and so like jumping back into the 90s. Back then, I never lived it, but just going into the 90s somehow. And reliving the whole beginning of this, because it was really new for everyone, and they were believing in something like completely new. It was really fascinating, because there is so much influence on my generation from this era, and it's like it's in a black hole of information. Nobody really knows what happened at this time. It's like there was no real newspaper following it, there was no internet, it's not really documented. So this was the first interesting thing, and then my relationship to the character is it's strange, because I when I was younger, I thought I would write a lot of books, and then I started to organize parties, so it's a bit the same way as the character. I didn't have enough time to write, but I still do. Maybe one day eventually I will write, but right now I'm more into parties. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it will have a lesson from
But don't wait too long.
I'm going to start to write tonight.
Yeah, that's right. You may be tired, but there's still a couple hours left. It's interesting that you say that it's something that wasn't really traced at the time, the subterranean kind of influence, because that's what the film feels like. It feels like it catches something so ephemeral.
It's true. I mean, when you talk to people of this time, it was like only 200 people who were really believing going to buy vinyls and to really spend all their money into this. It was really like 200 people who were meeting at the Queen. I mean, 200 maybe is a low figure.
No, at the Queen more, but then the people that were really into it, like buying the vinyls and crazy about it, passionate about it, yeah, there were 200, 300 or something, probably.
Yeah.
Parents.
Yeah. So nobody cared about 200 people. Then eventually there was a band called Daft Punk.
And there was this paper that gave the title to the film called Eden.
Yes.
It's not something I invented for the film. It's that gave really the title to the film. That it's a paper Sven told me about that existed in the early 90s and that had been so important for these 200 people who finally had the feeling that, oh, there is one paper that talks about what we like, what our music is, and something that I heard a lot from the people involved in the electronic music scene in Paris is that they felt, in the early 90s, they felt kind of despised. Like they felt like people were not considering it as music. And I found it as something that comes back. I mean, I've heard that a lot of times, like, that they had to, that it made their connection to this music and to the people involved in this music even stronger. The fact that they felt really as some kind of outsiders during a long time before it became actually like so popular and even everywhere. Now it's everywhere, electronic music, but it was not the case in the early 90s at the time when the film started.
Someone with their hand raised since like 2 hours.
Oh, you do? Okay. But it has to be quick because we have the high five. We have to, it's good. That's it's a, yeah.
It's not a question.
No, it is a beautiful explanation, and it's a fitting end to the evening. Thank you, and thank you guys.